Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Stees! Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue think the slate, dropping unrealistic mags, 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the milli, never hear me preach, look on to Philly. The more you watch the Eagles all the way through the early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals that fill the day. Good morning, everybody. It is Monday, April 7th, 2025. It's your boy Nicky Stees here on Monday morning for episode 4. Episode 4 of the 3-Point Blitz. And for today, folks, we got a lot of basketball subjects to talk about, and we're going to talk a little bit about some football news. There was a big rule change last week we're going to talk about, but there were several big basketball stories that occurred as well, so we're going to talk about them. As always, we're doing this on the Nicky Stees and the Hardcore Sports Network channels as always. Kicking it as always, so thanks to the Hardcore Sports Network for always letting us drop content on the platform. And now we're going to kick this thing off. Before we dive into the main subject, going to start this thing off with the rant of the week like we usually do every episode. Let's get into it. This time, we're going to start with the rant of the week. This is going to be a subject pertaining to former NFL quarterback Brett Favre. Here's the link to the story from ESPN itself. So to give you an overview of the story before I get to the rant itself, there was a lawsuit filed by former Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant against the Mississippi Today news outlet for stories they published about the fraud, as Phil Bryant, the governor, was one of the guys involved. As we know, former NFL quarterback and Hall of Famer Brett Favre was involved in this. Long story short, the judge dismissed the lawsuit against them. And I'm going to rant, even though this is kind of off subject with sports, I'm going to still rant about it itself because this is just ludicrous. All this whole suing people anytime you get caught up in trouble is ridiculous. And I'm glad that the judges strike this down here because against the former governor trying to play victim and file a lawsuit when in fact, they were the ones that were wrong in the first place. So now they're trying to play victim and get money out of it, thinking they're entitled to it, which is absolutely ridiculous. When the governor himself was involved in a welfare fraud, which was illegal, which is blatant corruption and criminal and theft, and then it's a shame because the same Brett Favre himself tried doing the same thing. And the thing is, I'm going to vent about is how ridiculous it is that people want to do this right here. They want to go out there, commit these horrible crimes. Then when they get called out for it by media outlets and it goes in the news, First instinct is to go for a lawsuit against whoever reports it. Remember, Brett Favre tried to file a defamation suit against Shannon Sharpe. That was ruled out in late 2023. And ultimately, yeah, Shannon Sharpe rightfully won in that case because ultimately he did his job, reporting the story and giving his assessment on the situation. And he was right calling out Brett Favre for it because what he did was criminal. Stealing money from the poor, knowing darn good and well that money is not yours, knowing where that money was going and taking it anyway, when you already have millions of dollars as it is just absolutely sickening. This is why so many people have lost respect for Brett Favre. But the rant itself is about how people in this world, particularly in this case, tying it into Brett Favre, since this is a football and basketball related podcast, want to play the victim when they get called out by the media for their crimes. They think they're entitled to financial compensation for horrible acts they committed. And the fact that Brett Favre, in particular, we even wanted to go for a lawsuit when he was the one that was damn wrong in the first place, it just shows what an entitled, egotistical, irresponsible person he is. I mean, so we know with professional athletes, they get passes for certain shit. We know we as sports fans tend to look more toward, well, what did they do within their sport than what they did in their personal lives? However, there are certain boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. And welfare fraud is one of those boundaries. Brett Favre crossed it and then tried to play victim. Tried to get more money through a lawsuit when you already have millions of dollars. Then you stole millions extra that wasn't intended for you when you never needed it in the first place. And then you try to go file a lawsuit against media outlets that reported your ass. That right there goes to show you how some people, just no matter what, you can try to look past them and look at what they did within their sport. Look at their body of work. You can try to, but some certain people just cross lines. There's no giving a pass for. And Brett Favre was one of them. And the news story that the former governor got his lawsuit dismissed reminded me of Brett Favre's situation. I just wanted to come on here and vent about it because I never really ranted about that story before. Look, Brett Favre had what he had coming to him. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. It is. I mean, what Brett Favre did, like I said, was criminal. It's a shame that some of these people think are so entitled and so irresponsible that in Brett Favre's case, he didn't even apologize, admit any wrongdoing. He said try to file a lawsuit against those that reported it. It's such a disgraceful situation. I'm just glad that Brett Favre's retired so we don't have to hear about him on a weekly basis. And it's such a shame that he did this. And I'm disgusted personally. As far as Brett Favre goes, we know, yeah, let's see how this goes with monetization. But you know what? There, Brett Favre. I'm glad that his lawsuits were dismissed, as well as the former governor. But see, this is why I don't like to talk about Brett Favre on this podcast, because he's such, not to mention what he did with the one Jets reporter sending those new pictures, all this while his wife was battling breast cancer. If that wasn't a red flag for you where you drew the line, this welfare fraud scandal certainly was. That's my thoughts on Brett Favre right there. I respect what he did as a player. I respect him winning 3 straight MVPs, consistently leading the Packers to the playoffs, leading them to 2 straight Super Bowls in the 90s. He was a key component of their success. So I respect him as a player, but ultimately can't stand him as a human. I'm just glad he's retired so I don't have to hear about him as much. But that's going to be my rant on Brett Favre. Now we're going to move on. Now that we got that rant out the way, let's move on to the better subjects. We're going to start talking about some basketball. We're going to talk about the Basketball Hall of Fame class of 2025. Because this is a fun class, interesting class, headlined by Carmelo Anthony and Dwight Howard. Now, I did drop a few YouTube shorts about it, but I never really talked about it. First, we're going to start off with Carmelo Anthony and Dwight Howard, since they're the two headliners. Now, Carmelo Anthony, throughout his career, multi-time All-Star. He was the face of the Denver Nuggets for a little bit throughout the 2000s. He was there when they got to the conference finals in 2009 against the Los Angeles Lakers, consistently led them to the playoffs during his tenure. Not to mention, on top of it, Carmelo Anthony was, one of the best of his era. Multi-time scoring champion, numerous time All-Star. Carmelo Anthony pretty much has all the accomplishments on his resume, except for NBA MVP and Finals MVP. And remember, during his prime, he was a force. And then even in the later stages of Carmelo's career, where he was more of a role player, even for the OKC Thunder, he kind of took a bit of a step back. He was still a solid player. And then remember, with the Houston Rockets and Portland Trail Blazers, Carmelo was a good role player in those situations. Obviously, he was a shell of his former self, but he was still a respectable role player in those situations. And then he capped it off with the Lakers. It's kind of a shame that he was with the Lakers during that dysfunctional bit where they had Russ and, AD, and that really didn't work out. Because, Carmelo, he retired in 2023 officially. So it's kind of a shame he wasn't there when they actually had in recent years where the Lakers have actually been a solid core. But Carmelo Anthony, throughout his career, he was one of the best players of his era. Like I said, the only accomplishments really missing from his resume were MVP and NBA Finals. Outside of that, he had all the accolades and all-stars there. Numerous time All-NBA team. And he was great in the Olympics, and too. Carmelo Anthony, one of the greatest players in the Olympics, too. Let's not forget his key role in that Redeem team in 2008 for Team USA and how much of an impact he made there. You mentioned, scoring champion in 2013, 10-time All-Star. Now, some people argue that he should have been Rookie of the Year because he had a better rookie year than LeBron, but that's a matter of opinion, though. But overall, man, Carmelo Anthony had a great career. Even at college, that 1 year at Syracuse, that one and done, he was Final Four most outstanding player. He helped lead Syracuse to the national championship. So he won there. And not to mention, he did win gold medals in the Olympics and played great there, which in some perspectives makes up for him not winning a championship at the NBA level. So Carmelo Anthony had a great all-around basketball career, certainly worthy of a Hall of Fame nod. And then you go to Dwight Howard, the other main headliner. Now, Dwight Howard, we remember more so Dwight Howard in recent years, in the later stages of his career where he became a journeyman. He was having a lot of one-year stints from different teams. And unfortunately, Dwight Howard got the reputation of being a locker room cancer when he was constantly going from team to team. He got into it with Kobe. He only lasted a year there. He was a few years with the Rockets, but then he got into it with Harden. They picked Harden over him. Then he had 1 year stints with the Hawks, the Hornets, the Wizards, and he started to develop a reputation of being a locker room cancer. But let's not forget Dwight Howard's career. What started in 2004, went to the Magic. He was Rookie of the Year. He was an 8-time All-Star throughout his career. And he was one of the most dominant players with his run tenure with the Magic. Not to mention, unlike Carmelo Anthony, with all due respect to Carmelo, Dwight Howard was the lead player on that Magic Finals run when they made it to the finals in 2009. With him, Hedo Turkoglu, Jameer Nelson and company, Dwight Howard was the leading force behind that run. You had Rashad Lewis was a role player there as well, but let's not forget, right after that 2008 Redeem team that Dwight Howard was on, what did his dominance do? It led the Magic to a finals run, an upset over the at the time defending champion Boston Celtics, and then an upset over the LeBron James-led Cleveland Cavaliers in the conference finals. And then they made it to the NBA Finals, and Dwight Howard led the Magic to that run. Let's not forget that, folks. multi-time defensive player of the year, 8-time All-Star throughout his career. Even early on in Houston, he bounced back from that bad stint with the Lakers the first go around and made the All-Star team in 2014 and played a role in the Rockets making the playoffs. So Dwight Howard, say what you want to say about him, but the man is a Hall of Famer. I mean, 8-time All-Star, leading a finals run, multi-time defensive player of the year, not to mention slam dunk champion. Remember the infamous visual of him flying through the air with the Superman cape in the slam dunk contest. Not to mention time he dunked multiple balls. Remember he kissed the rim and dunked it. I mean, Dwight Howard had some great moments, whether you're a fan of the man or not. You know, some people, I'm not the biggest Dwight Howard fan of all time, but at the end of the day, the man is a Hall of Famer. Now, he has its negatives that come with his career as well, particularly the later stages where he's got flopping from team to team. We know he had an ugly accusation off the court, which if that is true, well, that would forever stain Dwight Howard's reputation. But this isn't the time to talk about that. No, this we're talking about his basketball career. Look, the man's a Hall of Famer. Like I said, you don't have to be the biggest fan of him, but at the end of the day, man, Dwight Howard was a force to be reckoned with, and being an 8-time All-Star and leading a finals run is good enough to make the Hall of Fame. I mean, after all, Jalen Rose, whose claim to the Hall of Fame is a bit questionable, is in the Hall of Fame. Dwight Howard should be in. And then we get another one in the Basketball Hall of Fame from the women's side, Sue Bird. Now, admittedly, I'm not as familiar with Sue Bird. So, with all due respect to WNBA, I'm not going to have as much to say, but Sue Bird is considered a basketball legend, UConn Husky during her college days, which shout out to the UConn women's team. They won the national championship yesterday, defeating South Carolina. So congrats to the ladies of UConn for winning. And speaking of national championships, today we got Florida versus Houston, men's finals today. So we're going to stay tuned for that one as well. Speaking of Sue Bird, she's considered a legend. She averaged over 10 points most seasons, which by WNBA standards is great. She had a lengthy 20-year career, all in Seattle. So Sue Bird was one of the best all-around players for WNBA standards. And as a result, she's getting inducted in the Basketball Hall of Fame, which I do feel it's great that you're at least acknowledging the women, including them in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Because even though we all know the men's in the NBA is always going to be the bigger draw over the WNBA. That's just the way it is. It's at least nice, though, that we're actually giving the women some acknowledgement by at least incorporating them into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Because even for people that never really followed with the WNBA, they'll see the Hall of Fame. They'll at least give them the incentive to see, okay, who's Sue Bird? They'll look more into it to find out a little bit more about her, which is good because it at least gives their career some acknowledgement, gives them some shine even after their playing career, because people are going to go look up Sue Bird to see who she was, what she did with her career. Even if they don't really fool with the WNBA, they'll at least follow it. So that's good right there. They're at least incorporating them as well. And you also get Billy Donovan's another one, the coach currently of the Chicago Bulls. That's a peculiar Hall of Fame induction. He's getting inducted as a coach, which when you look at his resume, I mean, he did throughout his resume, look, 2-time tournament champion as a coach. You know, he's a great college coach. So he's getting his nods for that right there. You know, he helped lead Florida. Yeah, he was a great coach for Florida. He helped make them a prominent house. He led them to 4 Final Fours throughout the 2000s, 4-time SEC tournament champion, 6-time SEC regular season champion with him as the coach of Florida. Ultimately, you know, he was a great college coach. The NBA, Billy Donovan's been an underachiever. Let's face it, he was a better college coach. But hey, if you're going to include people for what they did with their college careers, then by all means, go ahead and induct Billy Donovan for his college career as a coach. So even though his NBA 10 years as a head coach hasn't really worked out, he's been a disappointment with the Chicago Bulls as their head coach. I mean, clearly he was better suited as a college coach, but hey, if we're going to incorporate college coaches in there, get Billy Donovan in there for what he did at college. So I'm cool with that. But that's a great way to segue from the college to the pros. We're going to talk about it because there was something big that happened last night. There was some big last week, pardon me. And that was Nikola Jokic put up a triple-double on Tuesday, on April Fool's Day. Ironically, this was not an April Fool's joke, but he put up a triple-double on that day, and the Timberwolves still beat them in a double overtime game. Whew. Now, for starters, this is going to put up a case for Nikola Jokic being the MVP yet again. I mean, because we know it's been a race. It's the SGA Nick Jokic race. Now, personally, I think throughout the season, SGA is the MVP. That's just me. However, but hey, Jokic is a close second runner. And let's not take away credit from the fact that he had a great game last week. I mean, without his triple-double, the Nuggets would not have made it as much of a competitive game. So on one hand, great job by Nikola Jokic, but also great job by the Minnesota Timberwolves as a team for staying in that game, taking it to double overtime win, in spite of the fact that ultimately Jokic was dominant. They couldn't stop Nikola Jokic, but this was one of those examples for the Timberwolves of a great defense is a better offense. And that's what happened. That's how the T-Wolves edged out the Nuggets in that one. They took that great defense is a great offense approach, and that's how they beat them. They knew they couldn't on offense, but their answer to that, score more points. So credit to the Minnesota Timberwolves as well for being able to beat this team. Anthony Edwards had himself a great game too, 34. Nickeil Alexander-Walker had 26 as well in this game. So the credit to the Timberwolves for getting it done as a team. Because it's how many times does a player score over 50 points for their team, yet their team still loses? Doesn't happen very often, because usually if you're getting up to that territory of 50 or more points, chances are you're the team that did so is most likely winning it. They still found a way to beat the Denver Nuggets in that game. I mean, that's right. Yes, sir. Crazy. What's interesting is technically UConn three-peated in terms of winning championships. And the reason I say technically, because it was the men's back-to-back last 2 years. This year, it's the women's. So, hey, UConn, credit to the women's for stepping up when the men's didn't repeat. And hey, UConn, though, to their credit, they got that proud tradition of winning. So thanks for bringing that point up, because that's another great point I wanted to bring up. So, yeah, shout out to the women of UConn. Congrats on their win. And, hey, we got the men's game. We got Duke versus Florida. We're going to have to see what goes down there. So, this is where all the fun ends for March Madness. And so that's again, Chad, as always, for stopping by, showing your support. Greatly appreciated. Hope you're having a great morning. And then, last week, though, too, I'm telling you, like I said, the best regular season game so far easily was that game between the Nuggets and T-Wolves. Now, some people are going to say that Jokic wins the MVP. And if that does happen, let's say Jokic does win the MVP, even though I personally think that it should go to, like I said, SGA. I think he's been the better player all season. But if Jokic does win the MVP, this triple-double game could be the deciding factor if they do decide to give it to Jokic. So that's something that if he does win the MVP, we could be looking back on this April 1st game as the reason why and say, hey, that's why Jokic won another MVP. But we're going to see how that plays out. But all around, though, great game between the Nuggets and T-Wolves. Great finish. Shout out to the T-Wolves for getting the win. And plus, Stephen Curry also had a 50-plus point game against the Memphis Grizzlies as well on April 1st. So great performance by the Warriors. Warriors have been getting hot though lately. Although they have cooled off a little bit, Rockets did manage to beat them yesterday. So shout out to the Houston Rockets. I know Rios is happy about that. And he's either going to be happy or sad at the end of the day, depending on how his Houston team does in the men's final today. So we're going to have to see right there. But yeah, shout out to the Rockets on getting the win. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about who's the contenders and who's frauds. So first, I'm going to pull up the standings, see where everybody stands. For the most part, it's clinched. Like the playoff play-in spots are mostly clinched. I think the East is all clinched at least for who's in, who's not. The West, there's still a few spots open, but for the most part, it's clinched. Now, give me 1 second. We're going to pull up the stats and we're going to break it down for you, folks. Folks, we're going to break it down in 1 minute. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen with you guys in just a second. So here's where he stands as a day. I got OKC out in the West. Cavs out in the East up front, but OKC got stomped yesterday by the Lakers, man. And OKC, even though I'm kind of iffy after their performance yesterday against the Lakers. Like, are you sure these guys are contenders? Are you sure? Did you see what happened yesterday against the Lakers? Holy shit, they got their asses whooped. I mean, Luka and Austin. Now they're heating up, and you also got Austin Reeves, who I feel is the best third man in the NBA right now. By that I mean he's the best number 3 option for a team. I got them as contenders. Nuggets I could see as contenders based on their past experience. They've been to the finals before. I'll consider them contenders. Clippers, frauds. Warriors, I could see them being contenders. We know Steph Curry's been there, done that, has that experience in finals. I'm on support of it. T-Wolves, frauds, Grizzlies. Well, we know I can't even consider them frauds at this point. I consider them underachievers. And now that I think about it, let's be real. I think the whole contenders and frauds label is a little bit too narrow. And here's what I mean. Hear me out. What I mean by that is it should be more than it shouldn't just be, oh, is this team a contender or a fraud? Because you could have some teams, case in point, the Detroit Pistons. I wouldn't consider the Pistons either because the Pistons are a good regular season team that's showing hope for the future. I don't think anybody sees the Pistons as legit contenders, but I don't think anyone sees them as frauds because to me, a fraud's a team that looks like they could be contenders, but is being overhyped. I don't see the Pistons as an overhyped team necessarily, but at the same time, I don't see them as contenders. So I don't think it's that you're either a contender or a fraud. You could be a contender, you could be a fraud, but you could be a team in the making. You could be a good regular season team that has potential to be stars in the future. I don't think that's necessarily a fraud. I think that's just putting it to its proper perspective. And like the Rockets, I don't really know if I can necessarily consider the Rockets. I mean, they could be low-key frauds because they're the number 2 seed and they have more upside, at least this year, but they could be contenders in the future. And then you get over on the East. I think the Cavs are low-key frauds, though. because they look like contenders, but come playoff time, I'm just not sure. Yeah, they've been great regular season team, not taking anything away from them, but come playoff time, I'm not sure how they're going to go, how it's going to fare. And then you get the Celtics. I mean, I could see them as contenders. We know they've been in this spot before. Knicks, I kind of think are frauds because they look like contenders on paper, but we know they don't play well against good teams. To me, they're a good regular season team, but that's it. And I think some people, I don't really consider them contenders or frauds. I just consider them a solid regular season team. And I think that's generally the perspective people have of them. So I think they're properly rated as a good regular season team. Bucks, I don't really think they necessarily fit the fraud label anymore. Like, I think the wheels have fallen off on them. I mean, they had the hype when Dame first came in of, oh, these guys could be contenders, but we've seen how they played in recent years. They haven't lived up to the contender label. And I think now they played enough time as a team where we realize, yeah, these guys aren't contenders. So I don't think the fraud label necessarily applies, or the contender label, kind of like I said with the Pistons. And then you got, let's see, the Magic. They're an improved team. I think, like, although like the Hawks, Bulls, Heat, they're total frauds, especially the Bulls. And the reason I say that is the fact that they're even in playoff contention is kind of ridiculous. They're frauds just for even being in playoff contention when really they're just a below average team at this point. I mean, if anything, the Chicago Bulls, to me, they're the kings of the play-in tournament, or the Chicago Invitationals at this point. They went from being the kings of the NBA to the kings of reaching the play-in tournament. Let's put it that way. They went from the Chicago Kings, no disrespect to the Sacramento Kings, to the Chicago Invitationals over the course of time. But yeah, they're complete frauds, as well as the Hawks, because they really got, to me, they don't have any business being in playoff contention. But that's just the way it is when you have 8 teams in a weaker conference. But yeah, so that's it for the NBA discussion I got for now. So we're going to switch gears, close this thing out, talk a little bit about the NFL. So NFL fans, stay tuned. Now it's time to talk a little bit about the NFL. Got the overtime rules. So it was put into play last week. I did a YouTube short about it on Tuesday that the new overtime rule is now that during the regular season, it'll still be 10-minute overtime periods with both teams must get the ball at least one time. That's the new rule throughout the regular season. So say if it ends with the touchdown, the opening drive, the other team will still get the ball first. But this has been applied to the regular season, which I think personally, like I said, this rule should just apply strictly throughout the entire season, including the playoffs. If you want a situation, I think personally what they should just do is play an entire overtime period. Simple as that. Let them play an entire overtime period. Since the NFL was becoming more lenient toward, well, both teams want to get the ball. Especially, we noticed, most notably, the complaints started after the Buffalo-Kansas City 2021 season divisional round when Kansas City marched right down the field and scored. Buffalo's fans weren't happy that they didn't at least get the ball. And that kind of really started the push for both teams getting the ball. But that was also during a playoff game, too. It's kind of odd that now that we're finally getting a rule in play that both teams must get the ball at least once during overtime, it's only applying during the regular season, which, like I said, if you're going to implement this rule, just make it where, hey, both either you do a full overtime period, both teams get the ball. Hello, what is up, Blazed Radio? My compadres from my time doing the Pick and Roll podcast stopping by in the chat. Thanks for stopping by, showing your support. Hope you're having a great start to your week on Monday morning. Listen, thanks for stopping by, showing your support. And while you're still here, Blaze, let me know, what do you think of the overtime rules? What do you think that the new overtime rule? You in favor of it? Would you have done it a different way? And then and anybody that stopped by in the chat. If you want to comment, let me know what you think of the overtime rule. Feel free, drop your opinion in the chat. More than happy to read it. And that's what we're here for. We're here. What I encourage people to come in the chat for. To let me know what you think about it. This is the perfect platform to come on here, voice your opinion, agree, disagree with what I say. And that's what it's all about, ultimately. It's about engaging with you guys. Like I said, we're allowed to disagree. Life would be very boring, like if we literally just agreed on everything. He said, "See, love the overtime rule. Just glad that both teams can get the ball on offense now. I actually like the college rules too." Which right? You go. So Blaze is a fan of it. Now, me personally, like I said, it's been going on. We've been hearing the rumblings about it for a while. I'm glad that both teams are getting the ball. I think, though, it should just be, like I said, throughout the season, including the playoffs, especially come playoff, because that was one of the big complaints. I know probably Steelers fans weren't happy with the Demaryius Thomas touchdown. Like I said, Buffalo fans with the Kansas City touchdown a few years back. I think that they should have made this not just a regular season rule, but at least, it should be throughout the entire season, including the playoffs. Now, I also was leaning toward maybe they could play a full overtime period. Some people might support that. Some people might be cool with it the way it is. I was thinking, if you're going to do a full overtime period, look, do full overtime period. The game's still tied at the end of the OT period. Regular season ends in a tie. Playoffs, we go to a double overtime if we have to. Now, I'm going to feel like this was overdue. A lot of fans wanted both teams to at least get the ball in overtime, so they did that. But I think with the rule they adopted, they should have at least incorporated that to be the case in the playoffs as well. Now, maybe they will do a revision. It could still be incorporated. Time will tell, but that's just my thoughts on it right now. And then, hey, we'll see what other rules they come up with. But hey, I'll say this. At least this is one of the more popular rules, it seems like, unlike most rules, because a lot of times fans aren't, we as fans aren't really big fans. Like I know last year's onside kick rule, we're still not rocking with that. But we at least got something cool in this case. But now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the top free agents that are still available. Because as we know, usually, and this is common every free agency, sometimes, top name May or June, which is what happened, remember, back in 2020 with Cam Newton when he got signed by the Patriots. It took him all the way until June to get signed. But let's take a look at this year's, though, see who's still available, and talk about why they're not being signed or where they could sign. Now, the most obvious one is Aaron Rodgers. I think we know the reason he's not getting signed. We saw his performance last year with the Jets. He looked like a shell of his former self. This was the first time Aaron Rodgers truly looked washed. And we remember his final year in Green Bay, he kind of looked like a shell of his former self. But even then, he still had his flashes of good. It looked like he was slightly on the decline that final year with the Packers, but he wasn't necessarily washed. Whereas, like last year we saw with the Jets, early on he showed some flashes of his former self, but as the season went along, we became apparent, yeah, he's not the same Aaron Rodgers. He needs to hang it up. And I think most teams feel that way. Obviously, that explains why Aaron Rodgers is still a free agent. Where will he go? Maybe Pittsburgh will just give in and sign the guy, or maybe they're still looking for a quarterback. But that's one right there that I don't know. We'll see what go. Roger, yeah, David Podman, what's up? Thanks for David Podman, excuse me. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your support as always. Hope you're having a good Monday, and we're here as always, kicking it on my channel, Hardcore Sports Network. We're talking about the top NFL free agents. Anyone in the chat wants to comment about it, let me know what you think. You're more than welcome to do so. As always, appreciate it. Your support. So Rodgers, I don't know where Rodgers could go. Maybe the Steelers seems like the only realistic option at this point. If they choose not to, I think he would just have to hang it up. Amari Cooper, it's kind of hard to determine where he's going to land. I think Amari Cooper might be a late signing. He could even get signed in preseason, maybe, if he just doesn't decide to retire before then. I mean, or maybe, because maybe if a team, one of their wide receiver draft picks doesn't really pan out or is showing red flags early, maybe they'll sign Amari Cooper, or maybe a team lacking depth with wide receiver might panic closer to the regular season and sign Amari Cooper. But I mean, last time he was with the Bills, for that, the Browns, I could just see a team looking for some depth at wide receiver signing him. It's kind of hard to predict where these guys are going to land now, honestly. That goes for all of them. Asante Samuel Jr., another one for the Chargers. Well, Nick Chubb is another one. With Chubb, I'm surprised. I mean, to me, I think we'll kind of, maybe after the draft, teams will evaluate their roster strength and weaknesses and then decide where they see fit. Like, teams will look at their running back depth chart after the draft to see maybe if there's room for Nick Chubb. Or maybe teams will look at their secondary after the draft and see if there's room for an Asante Samuel Jr. Or teams look at their wide receiver room, look for an Amari Cooper. So the reason some of these guys aren't being signed, it could vary from situation to situation. Maybe it has to do with money. Maybe certain players want more money than others. And certain teams might not be willing to pay that much for their value. They think that maybe they want more money than they're valued. Maybe teams tried to interview some of these guys still in the market, didn't see him as a fit. Keenan Allen, I don't know about him. I mean, we'll just see with some of these guys. Keenan Allen's another one that's still on the market. I'm surprised nobody's picked him up yet. I mean, Nick Chubb, we kind of know why, because he's coming off that injury. And you know how as soon as a running back suffers a major injury, teams are ready to move on. They're like, all right, we can get a new running back. And Keenan Allen last year for the Bears, teams were looking at him. I don't know. I think they're looking at the dip in production a little bit and saying, I don't know about this guy. But you got to remember a couple things with Keenan Allen. Last year with the Bears, the reason he didn't have as many receptions is because, number one, he was playing on a team with a worse offense, whereas like the Chargers, he had Justin Herbert as his quarterback. Herbert had more to offer as a QB than a rookie Caleb Williams. Not saying that Caleb Williams is going to be a bust at all, but I'm just saying Caleb Williams at times still looked raw as a rookie and still looks like he needs time to develop. So whereas with the Chargers, Keenan Allen had a developed Justin Herbert, whereas with the Bears, he had a still developing Caleb Williams throwing the ball. That's one reason for his drop in receptions. So if teams are going on this based solely on dip in production, I think that's kind of a lackluster. They're kind of giving, Keenan Allen, to be fair, he didn't catch as many receptions as he used to, but he still got 70 receptions for 6 touchdowns, over 700 yards. That's still nice numbers. Those are still excellent numbers. And right now, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to need a wide receiver for sure. The Texans lost Stephon Diggs. They could need somebody right there. I don't know. The Giants as of now need one, but maybe they got plans for the draft. That's something else you got to consider too. The Browns probably need somebody. Let's see. Well, the Bengals already got their guys, but curious to see. But some of these teams, yeah. Like, I think those are some teams that need receivers you could look at for sure. I don't know if, Green Bay doesn't have an elite receiver, but they got guys they're comfortable with, like Romeo Doubs. They're cool. I don't think they're going to sign any of these top free agent wide receivers. I'm thinking more maybe a team like the Chargers, because wide receiver hasn't been their stronghold lately. Maybe they could bring back Keenan Allen or go for an Amari Cooper on a veteran deal. Another one that's still in the market is Stephon Gilmore. And you look at teams that need guys in the secondary. And like I said, Dave, what I think is going to happen is teams are going to look after the draft at their depth chart, see what their strengths and weaknesses are, and maybe sign certain guys that they feel fill their weak points after the draft. So it's possible some of these guys, like the Amari Cooper, Stephon Gilmore's, J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubbs, and those guys might get signed after the draft, or they might get signed closer to the draft if an interview with a certain prospect doesn't go as planned, they might, like if they're trying to interview a running back and it doesn't go as planned, that team might then go for like a J.K. Dobbins or a Nick Chubb. But we're going to have to wait and see. I think we'll see after the draft more of these guys land places or as we get closer to the season. So it's kind of hard to tell where some of these top free agents will land as of now, but we'll see over time. Looks like that's all we got for today, folks. So everyone that stopped by in the chat, Chad, Blaze, David, anyone else that's in the chat, appreciate your support. If you haven't done so, please do me a favor. Drop a like on the platforms and make sure to subscribe. We're doing this on the Hardcore Sports Network and the Nikki Stees channels. Again, I have the links to them in the chat, so you guys can check it out. There's a link to the Nikki Stees channel and then the Hardcore Sports Network. So if you have the app, so make sure to drop a like on those platforms. And again, at work, hope you have a great start to your work week. That being said, have a great day. Thanks for rocking me as always. It's your boy Nikki Stees signing off. Until next time. Peace.